All right, so here we are in community development talking about CDIPs, sort of a final report. We were in this call just a little bit before saying that this is part of our archiving efforts. So hopefully we'll put this up on YouTube and I'll add it to the GitHub issue to explain this whole journey we've been through. And so as a refresher for most people here, but for other folks randomly on the YouTubes, hello, I'm Tim, one of the folks in community development. We invented this thing called Community Development Initiative Proposals, a small, basically micro-granting initiative, a scoping and coordinating and framing tool for ideas. And those ideas could be many different things: tooling, translations, content, technical contributions, anything that could engage the community. And CDIPs were applicable to diverse talents, right? So designers, writers, people who are great at analytics or reports, developers. It was meant to be a flexible tool. And it was a way to introduce a new initiative or expand the scope of existing initiatives within community development. And they worked well as a catch-all for projects that aren't quite at the scale of grants, which was a much more robust process, which as of Monday, we announced that that program is now sunset. And they also worked really well for people who didn't have a lot of time to commit, but had a pretty good plan to just put these milestones up in this format. Documentation will be on our GitHub issue, but they're also here within this presentation for the simple doc template, the way we make decisions about them, what to expect for the different stages, and then the pages within our community development portal about CDIPs. At a high level, what they did and what they didn't do is right here. They were there to scope small projects from beginning to end with just a nice light structure, or break up a large project, as I mentioned, into more digestible time-bound chunks. The heuristic was about 5K as the upper budget before it seemed to be people's ideas are a little bit too ambitious and should be in the grants framework. But we were pretty flexible with that. We iterated a lot, and we'll get into those highlights as we go. Now, what CDIPs were not supposed to do was fund existing projects or fund finished work or serve as a money tree. So yeah, that's not our jam. So some highlights, which are always the fun part, the stats. We actually evaluated 41 total CDIPs. We completed 28 of them. There are 2 that are still running, the LATAM DI action groups, and Kevin is working on a set of merchant pages or a QR code generator. We ended up pausing, archiving, voiding, or replacing, or stopping basically 11 of them. We had 28 people who proposed CDIPs and 8 people who proposed themselves as advisors, although it ended up being about 5 who really were like the full-time advisor people. We'll get into those roles as we continue. The average time to complete these was 2 months. I thought it was longer last time I did the data, but it ended up being 2. Our average time to approve one of these was about 3 weeks, and the program lifetime ran for a year. And there were 4 extensions: the transparency dashboard, the badges on the Makerfile forum, the LATAM DI action groups aforementioned, and the marketing team used a bunch of CDIPs to scope together a large launch for our community portal. And so more cool stuff or some impact, some delivery highlights. Again, 41 things can't progress in one slide, but we had 292 badge redemptions. We had a demo day, which is on our YouTube channel. You can find that for all of the cool stuff that we were building at the same time. Lisa, one of our contributors who is not here at the moment, but could come back at any time, did an amazing presentation about user personas and some research for our community portal. Kevin's directory page, the Voices of the DAO podcast launched. There's all sorts of magical things we did. The funds, I know probably some of us are giggling to ourselves, but running the numbers, 93K or so was requested and about 70K was dispersed. Most of the thing is that people were pretty ambitious. So a lot of ideas started as an initiative and that just kept growing because we have some smart folks. So I'd like to put a spotlight on the LATAM DI action groups for a second, because they were above that 5K heuristic cap and they've done a few of these now. So some stats on these guys is that they operate in 3 countries, Brazil, Colombia, and Venezuela. They have 7 unique contributors. 64 pieces of content have been produced. They have Twitter followers of almost 1,500, Telegram members of almost 1,500. They've started growing a P2P marketplace for low-fee DAI transfers using XDAI, DAI, and a little hacking on the exchange that shall be not named, which is like really cool. And their memes are fire. So shout out to the LATAM DI action groups and their advisor, David, for basically hacking the CDIP framework and doing something really, really cool, making MakerDAO global. Good job, guys. More examples, of course, we have our Chief Happiness Officer, St. Bourbon, who proposed the swag squad and has actually been sending out, I think, bespoke welcome packages to pretty much everyone, which is super cool. You can find his CDIP as like with all of these on our CDIP issue. There's actually just a tag for it. People forget, but Scott made MakerBot and Scotchpreneur, that is. And so he made a little chat ops bot that you can run commands on, and that proved that chat ops were useful, which is pretty cool. And I think you can still DM it. I don't remember. Another thing Scott did was he paired with Josie and Naz and Aaron and many other people to basically get our badges as a working prototype on the forum, which, as Naz sort of shared the later vision for this, started to enable like an actual reputation system for people who act in governance, which is pretty cool. Exciting to see where those go. So I really like to look at CDIPs as basically this story, right? Originally, it was like just a loose process framework to just add a plan to an idea. So it's not just like, I want to do a crazy thing. It just became, I want to do a thing. Here's a plan. Here's a budget. They grew into this storyline, which shout out to Amy for that mention, because I felt like that was best framing of just community members who were trying these new growth experiments, right? And each one was different, and they came in from a different angle, and they brought new skills and new ideas to ComDev, which is like super cool. CDIPs also allowed anyone to declare and organize a project that could basically improve the community in a measurable way. And I see this as sort of a pre-DAO thing. Now in the DAO, everyone's framing things as value, and CDIPs are one of the first attempts at doing that, which is super cool. And as with any program we learned, we started with this old process with a lot of boxes and words, and it definitely went through a series of improvements where we actually mapped the whole thing out into these swimming lanes of people who propose something as a contributor, people who support a proposal as an advisor, and folks who approve things as the committee of approval, right? We broke things into just 3 statuses: submission, execution, and completion. And I apologize, this doesn't all fit on one slide, but you can find this in our community portal as well. So with revisions comes lessons, and with running a program for a year, you're not going to do it perfectly. I think maybe I tinkered too much, but we learned a ton, which is super valuable. The first one, as I'm sure everyone's kind of noticing, is that settlement by committee is difficult. When you have 5 or 6 opinions, it's like really tough to get alignment, but it's a valuable thing to do. We also didn't use like one central platform for most of the activity. We used GitHub, but GitHub is like for software, not for project management or project updates. And so most of the time what happened is people would not engage, or it'd be like once a quarter or whenever an expected date was supposed to happen there. More often than not, this weekly call was probably a better venue for that, which we ended up doing anyway. Another thing is we could have, but we didn't announce to the governance group or sort of telegraph for new ideas. Would have maybe been a better thing to have done like a monthly, here's the CDIPs update, or produce something on the forum that was more like, hey, we want your ideas too. You're part of our community. On that note, another thing, probably more my fault than anybody else, is that the advisor role, these swimming lanes we just showed you, the yellow in the middle, you can see shuffled back and forth between the 2 other swimming lanes. And so as a result, they by accident started playing telephone all the time. They would go to someone who had an idea and try and frame and form it, then go to the committee to talk to them, and then they would take things back, when realistically we could have just opened up a little bit more and had maybe a better cadence on that. But again, we learned that over time. You know, on that note, CDIPs are for ideas, right? So they needed space for iteration. I think about a month or 2 ago, someone had great feedback about just opening up 15 minutes in our weekly sync to free up ideas before they become a CDIP, or before they become a grant, or before they go and join another team. And it would have been nice to have designed for that in the beginning, but again, that's one of those lessons you learn. So anything where you have a chance to meet with folks who are going to approve or vote or decide on whatever your idea is before it goes through that process would have been helpful. And so lesson learned, which is super cool. The other thing that's tough, as I mentioned, I see this in the DAO as well, is that framing something for its value is really, really difficult for humans. So it's pretty difficult to say, I'm going to do thing, price tag X. And very often folks would be like, I'm going to do thing, milestones XYZ, me the person with price tag Y. And so pretty often folks would just sort of default to contracting hourly rates. And that's just sort of the name of the game. It's kind of really hard to get into that mindset, but that's another lesson that we learned. And so why am I talking about lessons? Why am I going through this program? Well, part of it's a recap, but the other thing is that I think these are some good recommendations for the DAO. And then I'll end with sort of a little bit of a vision check, hopefully to inspire someone as they go from there. So the key is to frame problems and then just sort of decide, right? So if you look at these as micro grants, they're kind of small in the grand scheme of things. So look at them as a solvable problem for the DAO. Make sure the milestones fit. They're not like arbitrary. They're like there because they're achievable things. And then just take a bunch of bets, like evaluate a lot of them, and then just debate a little bit and act. I think a lot of times, probably my fault more than anyone else, we would like ask more questions, and then an advisor would go back to someone with an idea, and then we would evaluate it again. And there could have just been a like faster, tighter feedback loop. And then that would mean that you could take more bets on people, which would be super cool. Also, some process improvements would be nice. Picking one platform to update statuses and decisions would be cool. GitHub does work for this, but again, that would have been another telegraphing thing that would have been super nice. Say like you want to do micro grants, obviously the forum is a natural choice. And you could just set the expectation that updates on people who are working on micro grants will happen often. Also, I think I've kind of primed the pump on this, but removing the need for advisors would be key. I think this is already kind of happening in the DAO anyway, which is like really cool to see, is that everybody's opening up their ideas or their core units and they're presenting these things so that there's like an open process. But one suggestion here is just an accountability buddy, basically someone who reminds you to update everybody on what you're doing so you don't disappear into a corner. I mentioned earlier also an open idea review would be cool. Again, this is another thing where the forums is a natural choice. Or you could do these public calls where you are bringing something to the DAO, you want to solve it through this granting format, then you can just take people's ideas. And then that allows you to speed up the feedback and get some MVPs out there. Also, I definitely over-documented the heck out of this. Less documentation is always good. Keep things simple. Sorry, y'all. My other suggestion to the DAO would be to just maybe change the name. Micro grants or grant to hire or mini MIPS are all suggested. I like mini MIPS, so let's roll with that. I think that CDIPs could evolve and become a very useful thing, right? Like the original vision for them was that they would become a robust public good. They would seed small iterative improvements, large impacts, essentially punching above their weight class. Mini MIPS could serve as like a project tool before people do like robust committee things like core units or creating huge projects that could at least like prove their mettle, kind of like an alternative resume if you really think about it. Or mini MIPS could set an example for the broader ecosystem, right? As an earning opportunity for participants. It's a way to get out of that sort of traditional crypto sort of now 2021 where it's like buy, sell, hodl, and more into like contribute, do work, get paid, get ownership, feel like part of something. It's like another form of inclusion. The other thing is that if you step up to create a hopefully possibly future mini MIP, it would become a visible achievement, something that builds reputation. I mean, heck, we could even make a badge for it, but those are the lessons we did. That's the program recap, and that's the story of CDIPs. And I hope that someone finds utility out of it and does something cool. Thanks, everyone.